goes on media. This is Coming Out Stories. It's a podcast about one of the most important conversations of your life. I'm Emma Goswell. You're now going to hear from Doug. Doug realised he was gay when he had sex with his best friend the day after he'd had sex with his girlfriend at the time.
Oh, when I first started questioning myself, I remember being 7 years old, it's called a KOA camp, and it's a campground, and I would hang back because we would take public showers, and I'd see the hot guys, and my father wanted to know why I spent so much time in the shower, in the bathroom.
Yeah.
So I knew.
Where did you grow up then? Whereabouts was this?
I grew up in Montebello, California, which is Southern California. It's a very heterosexual community.
Oh, okay.
It's a very Latin community. I mean, I didn't know any gay people. None of my relatives were gay. I had no exposure to it. My mother and father would be like, they're odd, when they call people gay.
But I'm guessing, so you knew from the age of 7, which is quite early, but when did you first sort of act on it or tell anybody about it?
I first acted out when I was 14 years old. I had a best friend named Tony, and I had a girlfriend at the time, and I had sex with my girlfriend when I was 14. The next day, I was wrestling around with my best friend, and he shoved his hand down my pants, and we ended up having sex then. And I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. I can have sex with anything.
You were a busy 14-year-old.
I was very busy. Then, of course, you start questioning and you think, I must be bisexual. But then I just started pretending in my life that it was always a secret. You just didn't come out then, That was in the 80s, so you just didn't come out.
So why didn't you come out? It can't have been just because it was the 80s. Did you just think,
I did not come out on my own terms. I actually had moved out of my mother's house when I was 23, and I owned my own modeling school at the time. And so I was moving out. My mother was sitting on the couch. My father had died, and I was walking out, and she said, I found this magazine in your room. And it was called Frontiers at the time. It was a major publication in West Hollywood and all of California. And she's like, what's that? I'm like, we're doing advertising for my business. Just because I didn't want her, I thought my mother was very conservative. So I was planning on her going to the grave not knowing that I was gay, because I just didn't want to deal with it. And so I moved. At the time when I was moving, I was actually moving into with my first boyfriend. And she knew all about him. She knew he was my best friend, Jason. He came to Christmas with me. He came to all the things, but she just thought we were best friends.
And she definitely didn't suss it, because mothers sometimes do know.
Well, she never let on. I mean, she asked me if I was when she found the magazine, but she just bought my story and just dropped it. So, and what I finally came out is because after 3 years, I broke up with my boyfriend, and his best friend was very mad at me. His name is Nick. And so he called my mother's house, even though I wasn't living there, and said, how are you doing, Mrs. Stichler? Is Doug there? And she's like, no. But I had already told her, I told my mother always the truth about my life, except that I was gay. So she knew I hated Nick. And so she took that into account. So he's like, I just make sure you're okay, because I know how it is when your son breaks up with his boyfriend. And so this is back at the time when they had pagers. So at the time I was getting my pager just blown up from my mom's number. So I called her, and she's like, so Nick just called me and told me you're gay, are you? And I had the choice at that time to say yes or no. And I'm like, well, there's no better time than the present, apparently. So I just told her, yes, I am.
And that's over the phone. Was that weird?
It was very weird, but it was also safer for me because I didn't have to face her. But what then happened, though, it's been a few years now, me having a boyfriend, breaking up with my boyfriend, being pissed off that his best friend outed me. And so it was an hour and a half long conversation of her bawling her head off, talking about how, was it something that she did? Was it something my dad did to make me gay? The longer the conversation went on, it started pissing me off that, well, this isn't about me at all. This is about you being the mother of a gay son, and how is that going to affect you? And so when she did, she's like, was it something that I did or your dad did? I'm like, yes, it absolutely was. You weren't available. My father was never at home, because I was so pissed off that was the conversation. It wasn't about really me being gay. It was about, what are your aunts going to say about you being gay? What's your sister's going to say about you being gay? And she made me promise not to tell any of them. And we finally hung up. We didn't talk for a year and a half after that.
This is sounding quite familiar. I think this is quite a usual story for gay people.
Yeah.
And this is sometimes a good scenario.
Well, it was good for me because, I was fed up with living the lie. And so I think it was just the right time, right moment. now I look back and I thank Nick for outing me, which I still like to.
You wanted to kick his ass
at the time. I wanted to kill him, actually. Yes, absolutely. And then after that, I just think I thank him for it. But I didn't talk to her for a year and a half. And then one day she called me and she said, I'd rather have you in my life than out of my life. So let's start learning about this. And so, but I grew up with her and my dad calling gay people odd. They never used the word gay. And she'd come home from work and go, she had a person that was gay that worked with her, and she'd be like, hey, he has the AIDS, and like that's how they talked, and he was always odd, or he's lighting the loafers. And so it was always a detrimental...
Touch of lavender.
Yeah, it was always like a degrading way of saying it. So I never wanted to come out to her, but, life happens.
And it sounds like she's got on with it, and she accepts you and loves you, and she knows your
partner. Yeah, she died 6-7 years ago, but and then there was a weird transition where she tried to become too involved, so then she was like, I just want you to find a nice boy, and have you met so-and-so, because she thought all gays knew each other, because she wasn't open to it. So she started getting really involved in my life, trying to find me boys, and then she hated my boyfriends because they weren't treating me right, because I was always close to her, so I would tell her when we'd fight, and then she would hate them forever when I forgave them. She's like, yeah, but he did this to you. I hate his guy. Her big thing before she died was just to find me a nice boy. So
that's a good outcome then, really.
Yeah, it was a very good outcome, actually. Yeah.
And then since then,
we never talked about it much. We just didn't like I went home. I'd take my boyfriends home, but we didn't talk about the gay thing. It was just accepted. My nephews know, everybody. It was just like a family get together then,
So since then, have you just been out to everybody that you've met? Have you had to come out at work? Or?
Well, it's funny. So my whole career, I've always been like a business owner, and I used to run for-profit colleges, so I was always the campus president. And so I'd have staff of 50 people and 60 people, and I never just talked about that. And they always wondered, because I wasn't bringing anybody around, even if I had a boyfriend, because it wasn't just... There was never an opportunity to do that, and I figured I wasn't sleeping with them, so I'm going to talk about my sex life. But then as I got older, they started asking, and I was fine with telling them. It was a little different at first. I remember my first interview to get my campus president job. I felt the overwhelming need to tell the woman that was interviewing me, because we had an hour and a half long discussion interview, and I just really connected with her. I'm like, and by the way, I'm gay, and she said, well, good for you. And I'm like, but I felt the need to actually out myself to her, because I was so wanting to make sure that they knew and I didn't have any problems with it, So.
And I'm guessing in California they don't particularly.
They don't care at all. Yeah, they don't care. I mean, it depends on the neighborhood. I really think if you're getting a job in East LA where it's very Hispanic, or in Monterey Park where it's very Asian communities, there's still problems there. But in the main downtown LA area here, West Hollywood, there's no problem.
If you were to give any advice to anyone sort of going through the process and coming out, would you have any advice?
I would. I would just do it on your own time, if possible. Yeah. I think it's only your story to tell, so you get to choose how to tell your story. If you're going to do it, make sure you plan it. Just don't do it emotionally. Or don't do it angrily. We always want it to be okay with everybody. So when we tell somebody we're gay, that pressure gets off. It's like a release of, it's all off my shoulders. But they're still processing, So if you're in a relationship with a girl and all of a sudden they find out you're gay, I would just take the time to make sure you let them go through their anger, their grief of losing somebody that they thought they knew.
Right, I can hear lots of party music behind us.
Yes.
It's time for us to go and have a tequila.
Absolutely. Let's go have some drinks. Very excited to do.
Excuse the traffic noises there, but a big thank you to Doug for telling me a story as we walk through downtown LA. Please do subscribe wherever you get your podcasts from. We'd also love to hear from you on Twitter. You can find us there at Come Out Stories. I'm Emma Goswell, and Coming Out Stories is a What Goes On media production. Next time round, you'll hear from Charlie. Charlie came out as bisexual to a boyfriend, but now identifies as pansexual and is in a polyamorous relationship.
It's down to the person and who I find attractive at that particular point. But it's so much easier to say bisexual, and it's so much easier for people to understand. As soon as you start getting saying pansexual, then some people seem to think that you're off in some weird sex cult.